Dr. Rebecca Hayes wiped the sweat from her forehead as she stared up at the massive stone archway. The twin sons of Keth, 7, beat down mercilessly on her back, but she barely noticed. After 3 years of planning, 2 years of permit applications, and 6 months traveling through space, she was finally here. The Temple of Eternal Vigil stood before her like a monument to everything she'd ever dreamed of discovering. "Boss, you seeing this?" Tom Mitchell's voice crackled through her helmet comm. Her field assistant was somewhere to her left, his scanner beeping steadily as he took readings. "These energy signatures don't make any sense. The stone itself is older than our dating equipment can measure." Rebecca smiled despite herself. Tom always got excited about the technical details. That's why she'd brought him along. "How old are we talking?" "Try 50,000 years. Maybe older." Tom appeared from behind a collapsed pillar, his red hair visible through his helmet's faceplate. "Doc, nobody builds structures that last this long. Not even the Kethrii at their peak." The Kethrii Empire had ruled this sector of space for nearly 10,000 years before their civilization collapsed. They'd left behind ruins on 100 worlds, and archaeologists had been picking through their remains for centuries. But this temple was different. Everyone knew it. The Kethrii had found it here, already ancient, already sealed. They'd built their own structures around it but never dared to enter the inner sanctum. Rebecca's team had permits to document the outer chambers only. The Galactic Council had been very clear about that. The inner temple was off-limits. Too dangerous, they said. Too historically significant to risk contamination. She'd agreed to those terms, of course. You don't get funding by arguing with the Council. But now that she was here, standing in front of those sealed doors, Rebecca felt something pulling at her. Call it scientific curiosity. Call it recklessness. Call it destiny if you believed in that sort of thing. "Lisa, what's your read on the door seals?" Rebecca asked. Lisa Grant, their cultural specialist, was crouched near the entrance, running her gloved fingers over carved symbols that covered every inch of the stone. She was quiet for a long moment before responding. "They're not warning signs. At least I don't think they are. The language predates Kethrii by thousands of years, but the grammar structure is weird. It's almost like instructions." "Instructions for what?" Tom asked. "For entering, I think. Or maybe for leaving. Hard to say." Lisa stood up, brushing dust from her knees. "But here's the weird part. Some of these symbols? They look familiar. Not from any alien language database but from Earth." Rebecca felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean, from Earth?" "I mean, I've seen similar patterns in ancient human cave paintings. Petroglyphs from 10, maybe 15,000 years ago. Obviously not identical, but the symbolic logic is similar. The way ideas are connected." Lisa shook her head. "It's probably just convergent evolution of language. Sentient minds thinking alike across the stars. But it's strange. They set up base camp in the outer chamber that first day. The temple had dozens of rooms, all carved from single pieces of dark stone that seemed to absorb light. Their portable lamps created pools of illumination, but the shadows beyond remained thick and absolute. At night, the temperature dropped fast. Rebecca lay in her sleeping bag, staring up at the vaulted ceiling 5 stories above. Somewhere in the darkness, she could hear water dripping. The sound echoed strangely as if the temple itself was breathing. She thought about her mother back on Earth. About the little house in Colorado where she'd grown up. Her mom would be worried, of course. 6 months without real-time communication did that to families. But Mom understood. She'd always supported Rebecca's dreams, even when Dad thought archaeology was a waste of time. Rebecca found herself humming without thinking about it. The lullaby her mother used to sing when she couldn't sleep. A simple melody, passed down through the family for generations. Her grandmother had taught it to her mother, and her great-grandmother had taught it to her grandmother. Nobody knew where it came from originally. Just an old song worn smooth by time like river stones. The humming helped her relax. It always did. Day 2 and 3 passed in a blur of documentation. They mapped the outer chambers, cataloged artifacts, took thousands of photographs. Tom's equipment recorded everything, building a 3-dimensional model of the temple structure. Lisa worked on translating the inscriptions, though progress was slow. But Rebecca kept finding excuses to return to the sealed inner doors. On the 3rd night, she couldn't sleep. The rest of the team had turned in early, exhausted from the day's work. Rebecca told herself she was just going to check some readings, maybe take a few more photos. That's all. She found herself standing in front of the inner sanctum doors. They were massive things, 30 feet tall and covered in those strange symbols Lisa had been studying. In the light of Rebecca's lamp, the carvings seemed to shift and move, though that had to be a trick of the shadows. Her hand reached out, almost on its own, and touched the cold stone. Nothing happened. Rebecca laughed at herself. What had she expected? Some mystical response? This was science, not a fantasy story. She turned to leave, then stopped. The acoustics in this chamber were remarkable. When she'd walked through earlier, every footstep had echoed for several seconds. The walls seemed to capture sound and hold it, releasing it slowly back into the air. Just for fun, Rebecca hummed a few notes of her mother's lullaby. The sound hung in the air, shimmering somehow as if the stone walls were drinking it in. She hummed a bit more, louder this time, letting the melody fill the space. It sounded beautiful here. Perfect. As if the chamber had been designed specifically for this purpose. She hummed the full verse, her voice echoing and overlapping with itself in ways that shouldn't be physically possible. The harmonics created tones that hadn't been in her original melody, as if the temple was singing along with her. Then the doors opened. Not slowly. Not dramatically. Just suddenly there, swung wide as if they'd never been sealed at all. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat. Beyond the doors lay darkness, but not empty darkness. She could sense vast space beyond, could feel the movement of air from some enormous chamber. And from that darkness came a sound like grinding stone. Her lamp beam cut through the blackness, and Rebecca's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. The inner sanctum was huge. Cathedral huge. Stadium huge. The ceiling vanished somewhere far above, beyond her light's reach. And filling the space, arranged in perfect rows that stretched away into darkness, stood hundreds of massive stone figures. Guardians. Each one was carved from the same dark stone as the temple itself, standing 20 feet tall, their bodies covered in armor that looked almost organic. Their faces were smooth and featureless, worn away by unimaginable spans of time. They stood on individual platforms, hands resting on weapons that looked more like art than tools of war. Rebecca counted quickly. 50 in the first section. Probably 100 more beyond that. Maybe 300 total, all standing in silent vigil. She took a step forward, her scientific training warring with an instinct that screamed at her to run. That's when she noticed something that made her blood freeze. Every single guardian had turned its head to look at her. 300 blank stone faces, all pointed in her direction. No, Rebecca whispered. That's not possible. They're statues. Just statues. Then as one they moved. The sound was like an avalanche. Stone grinding against stone, dust falling in sheets from ancient joints. The guardians stepped down from their platforms, each footfall shaking the chamber floor. The vibration traveled up through Rebecca's boots, rattling her teeth. She wanted to run. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to turn and sprint back through those doors. But her legs wouldn't move. She stood frozen, watching as 300 impossible stone warriors advanced toward her. And then they stopped. 10 feet away they all stopped moving. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, in a motion so synchronized it had to be impossible, every guardian dropped to one knee. The impact shook the entire temple. Somewhere in the outer chambers, Rebecca heard Tom and Lisa shouting in alarm. But she couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't do anything but stare at the kneeling figures before her. They weren't attacking. They were bowing. To her. The chamber erupted with light. Holographic displays materialized in the air, thousands of them, covering every surface. Text scrolled past in languages Rebecca didn't recognize, symbols that hurt to look at directly. The guardians remained motionless, their blank faces still turned toward her, waiting. Rebecca heard footsteps behind her. Tom and Lisa burst into the chamber, then froze at the sight before them. Rebecca, Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. What did you do? I don't know, Rebecca said honestly. I was just humming. Just singing the lullaby my mom taught me. One of the holographic displays shifted, the ancient text replaced by something else. Numbers, coordinates, and a single phrase in English that made Rebecca's heart stop. Welcome home, daughter of the primacy. Rebecca couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air before her, glowing with an otherworldly light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her racing heartbeat. Welcome home, daughter of the primacy. She read it 3 times, certain she was misunderstanding. Certain this had to be some kind of translation error. Okay, somebody better start explaining what's happening right now. Tom's voice cut through her shock. He'd pulled out his scanner and was waving it frantically at the guardians, at the holographic displays, at everything. These things were dormant 30 seconds ago. Now they're active and bowing and apparently speaking English. Lisa had moved closer to one of the displays, her eyes darting across the scrolling text. Her hands were shaking as she worked her portable translator. It's not just English. Look, this section here is in Mandarin. That one's in Arabic. Spanish over there. The temple is communicating in every human language simultaneously. That's impossible, Rebecca said, finally finding her voice. This temple is 50,000 years old. Humans didn't leave Earth until 300 years ago. We didn't even have written language 50,000 years ago. Well, apparently somebody did. Lisa pointed to another display. Because this entire section is a historical record, and unless I'm reading this wrong, it's claiming humans built this place. The three of them stood in stunned silence. The guardians remained kneeling, their massive stone forms somehow radiating patience. Waiting. But for what? Rebecca took a careful step forward. Immediately, the nearest guardian raised its head slightly, tracking her movement. She froze. It stopped. She took another step. It tracked her again. They're responding to you, Tom said. Not to us. Just you. Why me? Rebecca's mind was racing, trying to find some logical explanation. I'm nobody special. I'm just an archaeologist from Colorado who happened to hum a song. About that song, Lisa said slowly. She'd pulled up something on her tablet, comparing data streams. Rebecca, when you hummed, the temple's audio sensors went crazy. Look at these waveform patterns. Your melody triggered something in the temple's acoustic system. It's like you entered a password, but instead of typing it, you sang it. Rebecca thought about her mother. About sitting on the porch on summer evenings, Mom humming that same tune while they watched the sunset. About her grandmother teaching it to her mother, and her great-grandmother passing it down before that. Just a family tradition. Nothing special. Except now 300 stone warriors were kneeling before her because of it. Can you make them stand up? Tom asked. Because this is really freaking me out. Rebecca wasn't sure how to answer. She looked at the guardians, at their blank faces and ancient armor. What do you say to something that's been waiting for 50,000 years? You can stand now? She felt ridiculous saying it out loud. As one, every guardian rose to its feet. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Holy! Tom backed up several steps. Okay, that's even more freaking me out. Lisa was frantically working her translator, pulling data from the holographic displays as fast as she could process it. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. Rebecca, according to these records, this temple is part of a network. There are hundreds of them scattered across the galaxy. Maybe thousands. All built by the same civilization. The primacy, Rebecca said, reading from the nearest display. Right. And the primacy wasn't alien. Every genetic marker, every cultural reference point in these archives points to one conclusion. Lisa looked up, her face pale. They were human. Our ancestors didn't just reach the stars. They ruled them. Tom shook his head. That's impossible. We have a complete fossil record. We know exactly how humanity evolved on Earth. We've traced our genetic lineage back hundreds of thousands of years. There's no gap big enough for an entire galactic civilization to fit. Unless they came back, Lisa said quietly. Look at this section. It's talking about something called the Forgetting. A catastrophic event that caused the primacy to collapse. Survivors fled back to Earth, but they'd lost everything. Their technology, their history, their entire civilization. They had to start over from scratch. Rebecca moved closer to the display Lisa was reading. The text was fragmentary, corrupted by time, but the story it told was clear enough. Humanity had risen to the stars tens of thousands of years before recorded history. They'd built wonders that made modern technology look primitive. And then something had destroyed it all, had stripped it away so completely that humanity had forgotten it ever happened. Almost completely. The songs? Rebecca whispered. They preserved the songs. Lisa nodded. Genetic keys. The primacy knew they were losing everything, so they encoded critical information into songs, into stories, into cultural traditions that would survive even if everything else was lost. Your family's lullaby isn't just a song, Rebecca. It's a key. Specifically, it's a command authorization for this temple system. But why my family? Rebecca asked. Why me? The display shifted, showing something new. A family tree branching back through thousands of generations. And at the root, highlighted in brilliant gold, was a name and title. Master Architect Hayes, Primacy Core Worlds. Because your ancestors designed this, Tom said, his voice full of awe. Your family line goes back to the people who built these temples. The song was their failsafe. A way to ensure that someday, when humanity returned to the stars, someone would be able to reactivate the defense network. Defense against what? Rebecca asked, but she had a sinking feeling she already knew the answer. The holographic displays flickered, and new images appeared. They showed worlds burning. Not with fire but with something worse. A darkness that spread across planets like infection, consuming everything it touched. Where the darkness passed, reality itself seemed to blur and fade. The primacy called it the silence, Lisa read. An entity that doesn't conquer civilizations. It erases them. Strips away their memories, their history, their very sense of identity until nothing remains but primitive survivors who can't remember they were ever anything more. And these guardians? Tom asked. They're the defense system. Not weapons exactly but resonators. They're designed to work together, to create a field that preserves memory and identity against the silence's erasure effect. Lisa looked at Rebecca. But they need someone to coordinate them. Someone with the genetic markers and the command codes to activate the network. Rebecca felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. 50,000 years of waiting. Thousands of worlds with their own temples, their own guardians, all dormant. All waiting for someone to sing the right song. She'd come here looking for ancient artifacts. Instead, she'd found the reason her grandmother had made her memorize that lullaby. The reason her mother had insisted it be sung exactly right, with no variations. The reason it had been passed down through so many generations that no one even remembered where it came from. Her family had been carrying a torch through the darkness. Keeping a flame alive for 50,000 years. We need to contact Earth, Rebecca said. We need to tell the Galactic Council what we've found. Are you kidding? Tom was scrolling through more data, his eyes wide. Do you know what this means politically? Humans have been treated as newcomers, as the young species that only just figured out how to leave their homeworld. Every territorial claim, every treaty, every agreement has been based on the assumption that we're the rookies. But if this is true, if humans actually ruled half the galaxy 50,000 years ago, then every human colony in existence is actually a reclamation. We're not discovering new worlds. We're coming home. Lisa had gone very still, staring at something on her display. Rebecca, there's something else. The temple's been monitoring galactic space since we activated it. It's detected anomalies. Movement in the void between stars. What kind of movement? Rebecca asked, though part of her didn't want to know. The kind that matches primacy records of the silence. Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. And it's headed this way. The Guardians suddenly moved, not toward Rebecca but toward the chamber's exits. They took up positions around the room, their blank faces turned outward, weapons raised. After 50,000 years of waiting, they knew their purpose. Somewhere out in the darkness, something had noticed that humanity was back. And it was coming to finish what it had started all those millennia ago. Rebecca looked at Tom and Lisa, saw the fear in their eyes that probably matched her own. She thought about her mother, billions of miles away on Earth, who taught her a simple lullaby without knowing she was passing down the key to humanity's forgotten empire. Get everything we can from these archives, Rebecca said, her voice steadier than she felt. Every file, every record, every piece of data about the primacy and the silence. We need to know what we're dealing with. And then what? Tom asked. Rebecca looked at the Guardians, at these ancient warriors who'd waited so long for someone to wake them. Then I learned how to use them. Rebecca spent the next 3 days barely sleeping. The temple archives contained more information than she could process in a lifetime, but she didn't have a lifetime. She had days, maybe hours, before whatever was moving through space reached them. Tom had rigged up a dozen screens around their makeshift command center, each one displaying different sections of the primacy records. Lisa worked beside her, translating as fast as the ancient AI would allow. What they discovered changed everything Rebecca thought she knew about human history. Look at this, Lisa said, pulling up a star map that made Rebecca's breath catch. It showed the galaxy from 50,000 years ago, and nearly half of it was highlighted in blue. The primacy controlled over 2,000 star systems at its peak. 2,000 worlds, all connected by human civilization. They had technology we can't even imagine now. Ships that could cross the galaxy in weeks. Cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants. Stations built around black holes to harvest energy. Tom zoomed in on one section of the map. And here's Earth, right in the middle of it all. The origin world. The heart of everything. Rebecca stared at the tiny blue dot that represented her home. To think that 50,000 years ago humans had looked up at those same stars and saw not mysteries but home. Not the unknown but their empire. What happened to them? She asked. What could destroy something that powerful? Lisa pulled up another file and Rebecca immediately wished she hadn't asked. The images were disturbing in ways that were hard to explain. They showed people going about their daily lives but something was wrong. In one image, a woman stood in the middle of a busy street, completely still, her face blank. In another, an entire city seemed to be frozen, its inhabitants scattered like abandoned dolls. The silence doesn't kill, Lisa explained, her voice tight. It erases. It removes the connection between who you are and what you remember. Imagine waking up one day and not knowing your name. Not knowing what any of the technology around you does. Not even understanding the words coming out of your own mouth. That's what happened to the primacy? Tom asked. Not all at once. The records show it spread like a disease, jumping from world to world. The primacy tried to fight it, but how do you fight something that attacks memory itself? They built these temples as a defense, created the Guardian Network to preserve human identity against the erasure. But it wasn't enough. Rebecca scrolled through more files, finding personal accounts from primacy citizens. One entry caught her eye. It was written by someone named Dr. Michael Hayes, and the date stamp put it just weeks before the final collapse. We've lost the outer colonies, the entry read. 15 systems gone dark in the last month. Not destroyed. Worse. The people are still there, but they've forgotten everything. Forgotten their names, their families, their entire civilization. They wander through cities they built but no longer understand, like ghosts in their own lives. The silence is spreading faster than we can evacuate. We've made the decision. All remaining primacy citizens are to return to Earth. We'll seal the knowledge vaults, encode the command protocols into cultural memory, and pray that someday our descendants will be ready to face this threat again. If you're reading this, if you've found these archives, then humanity has returned to the stars. I hope we're ready this time. I hope the Guardians are enough. Because the silence doesn't forget. It never forgets. And it's always waiting. Rebecca felt tears on her cheeks and wiped them away quickly. Dr. Michael Hayes. Her ancestor, writing a message across 50,000 years, hoping someone would find it. Hoping she would find it. There's more, Lisa said quietly. She pulled up a genetic database that filled the entire screen. The primacy didn't just encode command protocols into songs. They did something much more sophisticated. They altered human DNA itself, adding markers that would activate under specific conditions. Markers that would remain dormant for thousands of generations, waiting for the right time. What kind of markers? Rebecca asked, though she had a feeling she knew the answer. The ability to interface with primacy technology. Enhanced pattern recognition. Intuitive understanding of the Guardian Network. Lisa looked at her. Rebecca, everyone who's descended from the primacy architects has these markers. But in most people they stay dormant their whole lives. The only way to activate them is through the command protocols. Through the songs. Rebecca thought about her mother again, humming while she cooked dinner. Her grandmother singing while she gardened. Generations of women passing down a melody they thought was just a family tradition, never knowing they were keeping humanity's legacy alive. How many people have these markers? Tom asked. Lisa did some quick calculations. Based on the population data and genetic drift over 50,000 years? Maybe 1 in every 10,000 humans carries architect markers. That's roughly 400,000 people across all human colonies. 400,000 potential commanders for the Guardian Network, Rebecca said, understanding dawning. The primacy scattered the genetic keys across the entire species. It wasn't about preserving a bloodline. It was about making sure no single point of failure could end humanity's chance to fight back. Tom pulled up a new display, this one showing real-time data from the temple's sensors. Speaking of fighting back, we've got a problem. Those anomalies Lisa detected 3 days ago? They're getting closer. And they're not moving like ships. They're moving like something's tearing holes in space and crawling through. Rebecca looked at the sensor data and felt ice form in her stomach. Whatever was coming, it was big. And it was moving with purpose, heading straight for Keth, 7. We need to warn people, she said. The Galactic Council, Earth, everyone. They need to know what's coming. Already tried, Tom said grimly. The temple's doing something to our communications. Every message we send gets encrypted automatically. The receivers are getting gibberish. Lisa had gone pale. It's not the temple. Look at the communications log. Our messages are being sent perfectly. They're being corrupted in transit. Something is actively interfering with our ability to call for help. The silence, Rebecca said. It doesn't want word getting out. She stood up, pacing between the displays. Think, she told herself. The primacy had 50,000 years of experience fighting this thing. They'd built an entire defense network specifically designed to counter it. There had to be something in these archives, some strategy or weapon that could help. Then she found it. A file buried deep in the military section, marked with priority codes that made the temple AI hesitate before opening it. The Guardian network isn't just defensive, Rebecca read aloud. Each temple is a node in a galaxy-wide system. When activated, they create a resonance field that spans across light years. The field doesn't block the silence. It can't. But it can preserve memory within its boundaries, create a bubble where identity remains intact. So we're talking about a shield, Tom said. More than that. Look at this section. When enough temples are active simultaneously, the field can expand, pushing back against the silence's influence. The primacy used it to reclaim worlds that had been affected, to restore people who'd been partially erased. Lisa was shaking her head. But we only have one active temple. We'd need dozens, maybe hundreds, to create a field strong enough to matter. Rebecca felt something click in her mind, a piece of understanding that felt like memory even though she'd never learned it. The genetic markers Lisa had mentioned activating. She looked at the star map, seeing it differently now. Seeing it the way her ancestors had. The temples respond to the command protocols, she said slowly. I activated this one with my family's lullaby. But the primacy wouldn't have relied on just one song. They would have created multiple keys, distributed them across thousands of family lines. You're saying there are other songs, Tom said. I'm saying humanity has been singing them for 50,000 years without knowing what they were. Nursery rhymes. Folk songs. Traditional melodies that every culture preserved because something deep in our genetic memory told us they were important. Rebecca pulled up the primacy's cultural database and started cross-referencing it with modern human music. Within minutes, she'd found dozens of matches. Songs from every continent on Earth, melodies that had survived since prehistory, all of them containing the same encoded patterns as her lullaby. We need to get this information to Earth, she said. If we can get people to sing these songs, to activate the temples on other worlds, we can expand the network. We can fight back. How? Lisa asked. Our communications are blocked. Rebecca smiled, an idea forming. The silence can corrupt electronic signals. But it can't corrupt people. Tom, how many ships are in orbit right now? 3 supply vessels and a research frigate. Why? Because we're going to send messengers. Physical copies of this data, hand-delivered to every human colony we can reach. We'll teach them the songs. We'll wake up the Guardians on every world that has them. That'll take weeks, Tom protested. Maybe months. We don't have that kind of time. Then we buy time. Rebecca turned to face the Guardians standing silent watch around the chamber. 300 of them, ancient warriors who'd waited 50,000 years for a purpose. The primacy built these temples to be defensible. They stocked them with weapons and supplies. And they programmed the Guardians with 50 millennia of tactical knowledge. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what she was about to say. We hold this position. We keep the silence busy here while our people spread the word. We activate as many temples as we can, and we show the galaxy that humanity isn't going to be erased. Not again. Tom and Lisa looked at each other, then back at Rebecca. You're talking about fighting an entity that destroyed a galactic civilization, Tom said. I'm talking about buying time for humanity to remember who we are, Rebecca corrected. Our ancestors left us everything we need to win this fight. The Guardians. The network. The songs. We just have to be brave enough to use them. Outside, space twisted and warped as something massive tore its way into the Keth 7 system. The silence had arrived and it was hungry. But this time humanity was ready. The first ship arrived at Keth 7 just hours after Rebecca sent her messengers. It came out of hyperspace with its distress beacon screaming, trailing debris and atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches. Tom's screens lit up with emergency signals as the vessel limped toward the planet. It's the cargo hauler Morning Star, Tom said, his fingers flying across the controls. They were supposed to be 3 systems away, running supplies to the mining colonies. Rebecca watched the damaged ship struggle through the atmosphere. What happened to them? They're not saying. Communications are garbled. Tom frowned at his screen. Wait, I'm getting something. Audio only. It's the captain. The voice that came through was ragged with exhaustion and fear. This is Captain Andrews of the Morning Star to anyone on Keth 7. We need immediate assistance. We encountered something in deep space. Our crew, they're not responding. They're just sitting there staring at nothing. We've lost 43 people to whatever this is. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help. Rebecca felt her blood run cold. The silence had already started. Tom, guide them to the temple landing zone. Get them inside the Guardian field as fast as possible. Within the hour, the Morning Star set down near the temple in a controlled crash that tore up half the landing pad. Rebecca and Lisa were there when the airlock opened, and what they saw made Rebecca's stomach turn. The crew stumbled out like sleepwalkers. Their eyes were open but empty, focused on nothing. They moved without purpose, some of them walking in circles, others just standing wherever they'd stopped. Captain Andrews was one of the few still lucid, and barely. His hands shook as he leaned against the airlock frame. "We were in hyperspace," he said, his voice hollow. Everything was normal. Then the ship started shaking. Not from an impact. It was like reality itself was vibrating. When we dropped back to normal space, half my crew was already gone. Not physically gone. Just empty. Lisa helped him down the ramp. "How long ago was this?" 6 hours. Maybe 7. It spread through the ship like poison. People would be fine 1 minute, then they'd stop mid-sentence and forget how to talk. Forget their own names. Jenkins, my engineer, she stood in front of her console for 2 hours trying to remember what buttons do. Andrews looked at Rebecca with desperate eyes. "Can you help them?" "I don't know," Rebecca admitted. "But we're going to try." They brought the affected crew into the temple chamber, into the heart of the Guardian field. The effect was immediate and heartbreaking. Some of them blinked, confusion replacing the emptiness in their eyes. Others started crying, suddenly aware they'd lost something but unable to remember what. A few remained vacant, too far gone for even the Guardian field to reach. "It's not perfect," Lisa said, monitoring the crew with her medical scanner. "The field is preserving what's left of their memories, stabilizing them. But what the silence already took, it's gone. We can't restore it." Captain Andrews sat heavily on the temple floor, his head in his hands. "My chief medical officer, Donna. We've served together for 12 years. She looked right at me and didn't know who I was." Rebecca knelt beside him. "I'm sorry. But you saved the ones you could. You got them here into the field. That took courage." "Courage?" Andrews laughed bitterly. "I'm terrified. What is that thing out there? What could do this to people?" Before Rebecca could answer, Tom's voice echoed through the chamber. "Rebecca, you need to see this. Now." She ran to the command center they'd set up. Tom had every screen active, showing sensor data from across the system. What Rebecca saw made her heart sink. Ships were arriving. Dozens of them from every direction. Colony vessels, mining barges, research ships, even a few military frigates. All of them broadcasting the same emergency signals. All of them fleeing something that was spreading through human space like wildfire. "It's not just here," Tom said. "Reports are coming in from 17 different systems. The silence is everywhere. It's attacking every human colony simultaneously." "That's not possible," Lisa said. "Even the primacy records say the silence moved from world to world. It shouldn't be able to attack everywhere at once." Rebecca stared at the screens, understanding settling over her like cold water. "It remembers. The silence has been waiting for 50,000 years, watching for any sign that humanity was returning. The moment we activated this temple, we announced we were back. And it's not making the same mistake twice. It's trying to finish us before we can wake up the full Guardian network." More ships arrived throughout the day. The space around Keth 7 became a makeshift refugee fleet, hundreds of vessels packed with thousands of people fleeing the advancing silence. Captain Andrews organized the other ship captains, trying to bring order to the chaos. But everyone was asking the same question. Where do we go? The silence was spreading through every human system. Earth itself was under threat. The messages coming from the homeworld were increasingly desperate. The erasure effect had reached the outer colonies in the Sol system. Mars was dark. The stations around Jupiter had gone silent. Earth's defense fleet was pulling back to protect the planet itself, but they didn't know how to fight an enemy that didn't use weapons. Rebecca stood in the temple's highest chamber, looking out at the stars. Out there, billions of humans were facing an enemy they couldn't understand. An enemy that would strip away everything that made them who they were, leaving them hollow and lost. She thought about her mother. Was she safe? Was Earth holding? The thought of her mom standing in their kitchen, blank-eyed and empty, not knowing her own name, was almost too much to bear. "We got a message through," Tom said, appearing beside her. "One of our messenger ships made it to a world called Haven. They'd got a temple there, sealed just like this one was. They're asking for instructions." Rebecca took a deep breath. "Tell them to find someone who remembers old songs. Family traditions, ancient melodies, anything passed down through generations. Tell them to sing to the temple. If they have the right song, it'll wake up. And if they don't? Then we hope someone else does." Over the next 2 days, more messages trickled in. 3 temples had been successfully activated. Then 5. Then a dozen. Across human space, people were remembering songs their grandparents had taught them. Lullabies and folk melodies, nursery rhymes and traditional chants. Each one a key, preserved across 50,000 years of human history. But it wasn't happening fast enough. The silence continued to advance. Whole colonies went dark. Ships stopped responding to hails. And even here in the temple on Keth, 7, Rebecca could feel something pressing against the guardian field. Like invisible hands pushing on glass, testing for weaknesses. Lisa had been monitoring the field strength around the clock. It's holding but barely. The silence is concentrating its efforts here. It knows this is the central node, the temple that activated all the others. If it breaks through here, the entire network could collapse. How long do we have? Rebecca asked. Days. Maybe less. That night, Rebecca couldn't sleep. She walked through the temple corridors, past refugees huddled in makeshift camps. Families holding each other. Children crying. People who'd lost everything, clinging to the hope that this ancient structure could protect them. She found Captain Andrews sitting alone, staring at a photograph on his data pad. His chief medical officer, Donna, smiling at the camera. Donna herself sat nearby, alive but empty, her eyes tracking nothing. We served on 6 different ships together, Andrews said quietly. She was there when my son was born. Talked me through my divorce. Saved my life twice in combat situations. And now she doesn't even know what a ship is. Rebecca sat beside him. The primacy records say the Guardian Network can push back the silence's influence. If we activate enough temples, we can reclaim what was lost. Do you really believe that? I have to, Rebecca said. Because if I don't, then my ancestors waited 50,000 years for nothing. They encoded their knowledge into our DNA. They preserved the songs through hundreds of generations. They built these temples and these guardians and this entire network because they believed humanity was worth saving. She looked at the refugees filling the temple. We're worth saving, Captain. Even when we're broken. Even when we've lost everything. That's what makes us human. We don't give up. Andrews nodded slowly. So what do? We hold this position. We protect everyone we can. And we give humanity time to remember who we are. Tom's voice crackled through the comm system. Rebecca, you need to get to the command center. No. We're getting signals from Earth. Rebecca ran. When she reached the screens, what she saw made her legs weak. The silence had reached Earth. The feeds from the homeworld showed the erasure spreading across the planet like a shadow. Cities going dark one by one. Billions of people forgetting their names, their families, their entire civilization. The defense fleet was in chaos, crews forgetting how to operate their own ships. But then something changed. From cities and towns across Earth, a sound began to rise. People singing. Thousands at first, then millions. All different songs, all different melodies, but all containing the same ancient patterns. The command protocols, preserved in 100 different cultures in 1,000 different traditions. And beneath the surface of Earth, in caves and mountains and deserts where ancient peoples had once lived, temples that had lain dormant for 50,000 years began to wake. The Guardian Network on Earth was activating. It's working, Lisa breathed. The field is expanding. It's pushing back the silence. But Rebecca saw something else on the screens. Something that made her blood freeze. The silence wasn't retreating. It was gathering. Concentrating its power. And it was turning toward Keth, 7. It's coming here, Tom said, his voice shaking. All of it. Everything the silence has, it's bringing it here to break us. Rebecca looked at the Guardians standing silent watch around her. 300 warriors. Against something that had destroyed a galactic empire. Then we make our stand, she said. We show the silence that humanity doesn't forget. And we don't surrender. The sky above Keth, 7 began to tear. Rebecca stood on the temple's highest platform, watching space itself split open like a wound. It wasn't black. It wasn't any color that had a name. Where the silence pushed through into normal space, reality simply stopped making sense. Stars disappeared. Light bent in wrong directions. And anything that got too close just ceased to exist. All ships, pull back to minimum safe distance. Captain Andrews' voice came through every comm channel. The refugee fleet scattered, engines burning hot as they fled toward the edge of the system. But some ships were too slow. Rebecca watched helplessly as a cargo hauler drifted too close to the expanding tier. One moment it was there, solid and real. The next moment, nothing. Not destroyed. Just gone as if it had never existed at all. How many people were on that ship? Rebecca asked quietly. Tom checked his logs, his face gray. 347. 347 people, erased from reality in an instant. No explosion. No debris. Just emptiness where they'd been. The Guardian field is holding, Lisa reported, though her voice shook. But barely. The silence is pressing against it from every direction. It's like trying to hold back an ocean with a net. Rebecca could feel it herself now. A pressure against her mind trying to get in. Trying to make her forget. Forget her name. Forget why she was here. Forget that any of this mattered. The Guardian field pushed back, but for how long? The temple systems showed temples activating across human space. 20 now. 30. 50. People were singing the old songs, waking up guardians that had slept for 50 millennia. The network was growing, spreading its protective field across more and more worlds. But it was a race against time, and time was running out. Rebecca, we're getting a transmission from Earth, Tom said. You need to hear this. A woman's face appeared on the screen. She was old, her hair white, her face lined with age. But her eyes were sharp and clear. My name is Dr. Patricia Chin. I'm the director of the Global Historical Archives in Geneva. We've been studying the temples that activated across Earth, and we found something. Records that match the data you sent us from Keth, 7. The primacy didn't just leave us command protocols. They left us a weapon. Rebecca leaned closer to the screen. What kind of weapon? Not a weapon that destroys. A weapon that preserves. The Guardian network, when fully activated, doesn't just create a defensive field. It creates a resonance that spans across the entire galaxy. A frequency that asserts reality, memory, and identity against the silence's erasure. The primacy called it the Song of Existence. I don't understand, Rebecca said. Dr. Chin smiled sadly. Humanity has been singing fragments of it for 50,000 years. Every lullaby, every folk song, every traditional melody that survived from the old world contains a piece. Individually, they're just songs. But together, sung simultaneously across the entire species, they become something more. They become a declaration that we exist, that we remember, that we refuse to be forgotten. Tom pulled up data from the temple archives, cross-referencing it with what Dr. Chen was describing. She's right. The primacy designed the entire system around human voices. The Guardians are just amplifiers. The real power comes from us. But we'd need everyone, Lisa said. Every human in the galaxy singing at the same time. That's 4 billion people scattered across hundreds of worlds. 4,300,000,000 and change, Tom corrected. And yes, we'd need all of them. Or close to it. Rebecca looked out at the tear in space, at the silence pushing through. It was growing larger. Soon it would reach the planet itself. Soon it would break through the Guardian field, and then everyone in the temple, all the refugees they'd protected, would be erased just like that cargo ship. Unless they fought back. Can we do it? Rebecca asked Dr. Chin. Can we coordinate 4 billion people to sing simultaneously? We've already started. Every communications network, every broadcast system, every device capable of transmitting sound. We're sending out the complete song of existence. Teaching people their parts. It's in dozens of languages, hundreds of regional variations, but the underlying structure is the same. Dr. Chin paused. But Rebecca, it needs a conductor. Someone at the heart of the Guardian network to coordinate the resonance. Someone with the genetic markers to interface with all the temples at once. Rebecca understood. Me. You. Your bloodline is the master key. You can link yourself to every active temple in the network. But I won't lie to you. The strain of channeling that much power through a human mind, even one genetically designed for it, could be fatal. Tom grabbed Rebecca's arm. No. Absolutely not. There has to be another way. There isn't, Rebecca said gently. She'd known this was coming. Had known since she first saw her ancestors' message in the archives. Some things were worth dying for. Some things were worth more than one life, even if that life was your own. She thought about her mother. Hoped she was safe. Hoped Earth's Guardian field was holding. Hoped that somewhere her mom was learning the song, preparing to add her voice to billions of others. Tell everyone to get ready, Rebecca said. How long until we can coordinate the song? 2 hours, Dr. Chin replied. Maybe less. People are learning fast. It's like the melody is already inside them, just waiting to be remembered. The next 2 hours were the longest of Rebecca's life. She used the time to walk through the temple, talking to the refugees. Listening to their stories. A woman from Mars who'd been a teacher before the silence came. A young man from the asteroid belts who'd lost his entire family. An elderly couple from Earth who'd been married for 60 years and refused to be separated, even by erasure. They all knew what was coming. They all understood that this might be humanity's last stand. But none of them gave up. None of them stopped hoping. Captain Andrews found her near the main chamber. Donna was with him, the chief medical officer who'd forgotten everything. But she was holding his hand, and there was a glimmer of recognition in her eyes. The Guardian field was helping her remember, piece by piece. Whatever happens, Andrews said, thank you. For giving us a chance. For helping us remember we're more than just bodies wandering through space. Rebecca hugged him. Thank you for getting your people here. For saving everyone you could. Tom and Lisa were waiting in the central chamber, surrounded by the 300 Guardians. The ancient warriors had moved into formation, creating a perfect circle around the room. They were ready. The temples are synchronized, Tom reported. 87 active nodes across human space. All of them linked to this location waiting for your signal. Lisa handed her a data pad showing the Song of Existence. It's long. 15 minutes, start to finish. You'll need to maintain the connection the entire time. Rebecca, are you sure about this? No, Rebecca admitted. I'm terrified. But I'm doing it anyway. She moved to the center of the chamber, to a raised platform that the Guardians had cleared. The temple systems activated around her, holographic displays showing every active temple in the network. She could feel them, each one a point of light in her mind. 87 temples. 87 nodes in a network that spanned the galaxy. And beyond them she could feel something else. Billions of individual lights, each one a human mind preparing to sing. Her mother on Earth. Refugees on colony worlds. Miners in the asteroid belts. Researchers on distant stations. All of them connected, all of them ready. Dr. Chen's voice came through one final time. We're ready when you are. On your mark, Rebecca. Rebecca took a deep breath. She thought about the primacy, about her ancestors who'd built all this. About 50,000 years of mothers singing to children, of families preserving melodies they didn't understand, of humanity carrying a torch through the darkness without knowing why. They'd known this moment would come. Had prepared for it across hundreds of generations. Had encoded everything humanity needed to survive into songs and stories and genetic memory. Now it was time to show the silence what that meant. Begin, Rebecca said. She started singing, and her voice was immediately amplified by the Guardians, by the temple, by every node in the network. The Song of Existence poured out of her, ancient words and languages that hadn't been spoken in 50 millennia. But somehow she knew them. They were written into her DNA, preserved in her genetic memory. On Earth, 4 billion people began to sing. Each person sang their part, their variation of the ancient melody. A mother's lullaby in Beijing. A folk song in Brazil. A traditional chant in Kenya. A nursery rhyme in Alaska. All different but all part of the same whole. The sound built like a wave. Rebecca could feel it flowing through the Guardian network, through every temple, through space itself. The silence pushed back, trying to break through, trying to silence the song. But it couldn't. For every voice it tried to erase, 1,000 more joined in. The strain was immense. Rebecca felt like she was holding the weight of an entire galaxy in her mind. The temples burned bright in her consciousness, each one a star of preserved memory and identity. The pain was incredible, threatening to tear her apart from the inside. But she kept singing. On Mars, people who'd been partially erased suddenly remembered their names. On the Jupiter stations, crews forgotten how to operate their ships suddenly knew again. Across human space, the Song of Existence pushed back the silence's influence, asserting reality against erasure. The tear in space above Keth, 7 began to shrink. The silence retreated, unable to maintain its presence against the combined will of 4 billion humans all declaring that they existed, that they remembered, that they mattered. Rebecca's voice was failing. Blood ran from her nose. Her knees buckled. But she kept singing because stopping meant death for everyone. Tom and Lisa were beside her, supporting her weight. The Guardians had moved closer, their ancient forms glowing with power as they channeled energy into the network. They were helping her, sharing the burden. The song reached its crescendo. Every human voice in the galaxy singing as one, a declaration that echoed across light years. The silence couldn't withstand it. For the first time in 50,000 years, it encountered something it couldn't erase. A species that had encoded its own existence so deeply that even complete destruction couldn't kill it. A civilization that had survived apocalypse and forgotten everything except how to be human. And that humanity, that stubborn insistence on existing, on remembering, uncaring, was stronger than any force that tried to erase it. The tear in space sealed. The silence retreated into the void between stars, wounded and defeated. The Guardian Network held a web of preserved memories spanning the galaxy. Rebecca collapsed. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was her mother's voice, singing the lullaby from her childhood. The same song that had started everything. The same melody that had waited 50,000 years to save humanity. She woke 3 days later in the temple's medical bay. Tom and Lisa were there, along with Captain Andrews and Donna, who smiled at her with clear, remembering eyes. "You did it," Tom said, his voice thick with emotion. "The silence is gone. Or at least it's retreated. Earth is secure. All the colonies are recovering." "How many?" Rebecca asked, her voice hoarse. "How many what? How many did we lose?" Lisa squeezed her hand. "Too many. Millions were partially erased before we could stop it. But millions more were saved because you gave humanity time to remember. Time to sing." Rebecca closed her eyes. Millions lost. But billions saved. Would have to be enough. Over the following weeks, humanity began the long process of recovery. The Guardian Network remained active, a permanent defense against future attacks. Temples across the galaxy became centers of learning, places where people could study the primacy's legacy and prepare for the day when the silence might return. Because Rebecca knew it would return. Someday. The silence was patient. It could wait decades, centuries, millennia. But so could humanity. They'd proven that. 50,000 years of waiting, of preserving songs and stories, of keeping memories alive through sheer stubborn will. Rebecca stayed on Keth, 7, teaching others how to use the Guardian Network. Her mother came to visit, crossing half the galaxy just to hold her daughter and sing the lullaby they both knew was more than just a song. "I'm proud of you," her mother said. "Your grandmother would be too. And all the grandmothers before her, all the way back to the beginning." Rebecca smiled. "We're all connected. Every human who ever lived, who ever sang a song to their children, who ever passed down a story. We're all part of the same chain. The same memory." Her mother hummed the lullaby and Rebecca joined in. Outside, the Guardian stood watch. Ready. Waiting. Protecting. Humanity had come home to the stars. And this time they would never forget who they were. Because forgetting wasn't something humanity did. They remembered. Through songs and stories, through genetic memory and stubborn hope, through the simple act of mothers singing to children in the dark. They remembered. And they always would. The silence could erase ships and planets and entire civilizations. But it couldn't erase a lullaby sung with love across 50,000 years. And in the end, that made all the difference.